What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now it's time for us to jump into some X Factor. Now, it's going to be a two-part story arc where we see X Factor dealing with the Mutant Liberation Front. This is them kind of getting involved with the whole idea of Strife. Now remember, we only been seeing Strife over in X-Force because Cable has been trying to hunt that man down. We also know that Strife has the same face as Cable. Of course, we already know that he is the clone of Cable. Either way, though, when it comes to X Factor, they haven't really had the chance to actually deal with Strife up until this moment. But it's also X Factor finding out that somebody else from their past is also alive again. And that would be Mr. Sinister. And so let's begin this two-part story arc that takes place in issues number 77 and 78. And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with X Factor issue number 76, where we actually pick up at a clinic. And we pick up with a guy known as Dr. Tucker. Now, Dr. Tucker, he was able to actually build a test that allow parents to find out if their baby is going to be a mutant or not. And that is really important for today's video, because now you are talking about the idea of having a way to slow down the mutant race, the growth of the mutant race. Because if you have parents out there who want to know if their child is going to be a human or a mutant, then that test is out there to tell them if their child is going to be one or not. And if you have parents who hate the idea of their child being a mutant, well then they can have an abortion. And so it kind of goes into the whole idea of slowing down the growth of the mutant race, another way to actually attack the mutant race. Now, Dr. Tucker tells us that his actual test is not bulletproof. Like, it's only a 55% chance that their child might come out as a mutant. But that is a very huge chance at the moment for this couple. But now the question is, what would happen down the road if his test gets better, where he is able to easily find out if a baby is going to be a mutant or not? But now we jump over to X Factor. Now remember, in an earlier story arc, you have the team had a run-in with the Nasty Boys. Now the Nasty Boys work for Mr. Sinister, but they were able to capture at least two members of that actual group. That will be Slab and also Hairbag. Honestly, those names still suck. Either way, those two characters are currently prisoners, and you have Wolfbane kind of checking in on them. But while doing that, out of nowhere, a random portal begins to open up. Now, before we're able to see what was inside that portal, we actually jump over to Val Cooper. Now, Val Cooper, let's not forget, she is the liaison for X Factor, because remember, X Factor is a government team for America, because the government is trying to build relations between the mutant race, but also the government as well. Now, we're also being introduced to a new character known as Vicky Wang. Now, Wang is really trying to be this big time public defender. Let me explain. So to her, she feels like even though bad guys do bad things, they still have the right to have an actual trial. Because usually if a hero stops a bad guy, that bad guy is instantly thrown into prison and locked away for a very long time until somebody's able to break them free. And so she's saying even though those two guys, Slab and Hairbag, had did some damage in an earlier story arc, they still have the right for a fair trial. But let's get back over to, well, Wolfbane, because remember, a portal opened up out of nowhere, and we kind of find out that it was actually the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, originally, when we had met this group of people, we were left to believe that their main goal is to go around the world to free mutants who are being held as prisoners by the governments of the world. But also, they're being controlled by Strife. Now for Strife, he wants to help out the mutant race, quotation marks, but he also has his own personal goal. But either way, they are currently here to free Slab and Hairbag. And so we get a big battle between X-Factor and also them. Now it's kind of funny because at first you have the actual group believe that X-Factor is X-Force, not knowing that this is actually X-Factor. And it kind of shows that X-Force had already at this point made a name for themselves, and so had Excalibur and the X-Men team. But for X-Factor, they're kind of the new team on the block by this point in Marvel Comics. Now, we actually jump over to a character known as Vic Chalker. Now, we actually met Vic a while back in X-Factor, and really, for this character, he only appears here and there in all the books. Like, he has a big plan to kill off the mutant race, or we're kind of left to believe he had a big plan. And here's the reason why I'm saying that. Because in our last video, we saw him trying to build this armor suit to use against the mutant race. But every single time he thought it was ready, something else had been done in the actual suit. Well, today, it's finally done. But then he realized it's going to storm. And so he said, you know what? Let me go ahead and go back inside and wait for the storm to pass. Unfortunately, he is hit by lightning. And when it happens, well, he gets shocked big time to the point where he is basically killed off inside his suit. Now, Cannonball, who's also part of X-Force, flies by. And to him, he thinks a statue. But in reality, there was a poor old man inside that suit who was just killed off by a bad storm. Now, Cannonball has a mission, which is to find X-Factor, to find Wolfbane. And really, getting back over to X-Factor, we actually see X-Factor fighting against the Mutant Liberation Front still. Now, their battle goes on for a few more pages, but you actually have the group use a mutant known as Zero to be able to open up a portal to allow them to actually escape. Now, for X-Factor, they're trying their best to stop them. And so you have Polaris try to use her powers on the actual group, except most of the bad guys are able to make it through. But Polaris powers does grab somebody. It's Strife, their actual leader. Now, he is being pulled back through the portal that Zero had opened up earlier, but now he's being pulled by both groups between this portal. Now, for our heroes, this is the first time they have actually met Strife, but they don't know his actual name yet. Now, after you have a good old tug of war on Strife's body, the actual bad guys are able to pull their boss back into the portal, back over to their side. But here's the catch. Wolfbane was able to get a smell on Strife, and to her, he smelled very familiar, kind of like possibly Cable. And so now for X-Factor, they're kind of wondering who in the world is that group. Now, after the whole battle, you do have the group meet up because they have to talk about what happened to Jamie Madrox in our last video. Not our last video, but a couple of videos ago. You see, when it comes to Jamie, he has the ability to make clones of himself. But one of his clones was actually recruited by Mr. Sinister for like 6 months. Now, once he was able to re-absorb that actual clone, he kind of learned a tad bit about what's happening with Mr. Sinister. Not a lot, but he's able to tell Havoc like, hey, this guy, Sinister, is alive again. Now for Havoc, he cannot believe that he's alive again because the last time we saw Sinister was back in X-Men Inferno, where Cyclops had killed him off. But apparently, the man is alive again, and that's pretty huge for all the X-Men teams. Now, I kind of want to jump back over to Wolfbane. Here's the reason why. So Wolfbane, in the last couple of videos, we kind of realized that something is off about her, especially with the idea that she's going to fall in love with Havoc. Now, let's not forget, Havoc is with Polaris, but for some reason, it does seem like Wolfbane is now very attracted to, well, Havoc. Now, for Polaris, she also kind of realized there's something else going on with Wolfbane. Now, if you've seen our last video, she killed a man. She went feral when she was in her wolf form, and that's pretty huge. Now, before she's able to explain what's happening to her, she's then grabbed by Cannonball. Now, this is a throwback because back in the early days of the 1980s for Marvel Comics, both Cannonball and Wolfbane were part of the New Mutants, but at the tail end of that run, you had different members of the New Mutants leave the team when Cable had taken over, and one of those characters was Wolfbane. Now, Wolfbane had rejoined X-Factor, not rejoined, but she did join a new team after leaving the New Mutants. But for Cannonball, he says that he has been watching her for a while, and he kind of realized there is something wrong with her. Now, no one is actually able to tell us what's wrong with her, but for Cannonball, he believes that she'll do better with people her own age, talking about joining X-Force. But the problem is, she does not want to leave at all. But for him, she has to, because most of the members of X-Factor, they're older people. And for him, she does not fit in with the older crowd. Now, she tells him no, and you have Cannonball trying to force her to leave, and you do have Polaris use her power in a way to kind of stop him from making her leave. Now, she is able to convince him to leave her alone. Now, when Havoc walks out, he sees Cannonball. And let's not forget that around this time, X-Force is wanted because they have pulled off a lot of questionable things in Marvel Comics. But also, the word on the street is that they have also done some other things behind the scenes. So they're kind of wanted by the law. And with X-Factor being a government team, they have to bring in X-Force. But you have Polaris listen to Wolfbane because she said, no, we're not going to capture him. Let Cannonball leave. And so he does leave. Now for Havoc, he's kind of wondering, why in the world did they let him go? But for Polaris, she says because Wolfbane asked for it. Now, the last page of the book, we actually see the Mutant Liberation Front meet back up with their boss. And you have their boss inform them that they now have a new mission. And that new mission is to now attack that clinic we saw earlier on in this video. The one that had the test to figure out if your baby is going to be a mutant or not. And so getting into the opening pages for the next chapter, we actually pick up with the character known as Tempo. Now, Tempo has the ability to slow things around her. So for example, in a certain amount of area around her, things are able to slow down to a certain point of speed. So sometimes she is able to make people freeze completely in place or just slow them down far enough so that she's able to move faster than them. Now, we do see Tempo calling up Dr. Tucker, the guy who owns the clinic. Now, for me personally, I feel like this is her father. And here's the reason why. Her last name is Tucker. It's Heather Tucker. And his name is Dr. Tucker. Either way, she does inform him that his clinic is going to be attacked very soon by a terrorist group. Now, getting back over to X-Factor, you have Val Cooper introducing the team's own danger room. Now, for our heroes, they're not really excited about the idea of the danger room. And the reason why, because at this point in their lives, they truly know how to use their powers in the battlefield. They're mostly grown adults, but also they kind of feel like they should have been consulted when it came to the idea of designing the actual danger room. And for Havoc, he's wondering, what is the point of this? And you have Val Cooper say, well, the president and other people in the government feel like you guys need some training. And so the danger room sessions are going to be mandatory. Now, for our heroes, they completely ignore her and walk away. But the door is now open with the idea of X-Factor having their own danger room to use to make sure they're ready in the field. Now, you do have Strong Guy run into Vicky. Now, remember, Vicky Wang is supposed to be like, you know, this lawyer trying to help out bad guys who've been placed in prisons without actually having a trial. And she only came by here to kind of talk to Val Cooper, but we're kind of given the idea and the possibility that her and Strong Guy might become a couple because Strong Guy was flirting very hard there with her. Now, we also get another page where we do see Sinister stopping by the base of the Mutant Liberation Front to pick up the two guys who used to work for him, who were part of the Nasty Boys, so Hairbag and also Slab. It's a quick page, but it also tells us that Sinister and Strife are kind of working together here. Now the problem is though, what is their big plan? Because we have no idea what that plan truly is. Now getting back over to Havoc, he does call up Charles Xavier and also Scott Summers to inform them that, hey listen, Sinister is still alive. Now for the X-Men and also X-Factor, they really can't believe that he is alive because like I said earlier, we all were left to believe back in X-Men Inferno that Scott Summers had killed him off. To only find out now that no, he's actually alive and well. Either way, it's now the X-Men being on guard, and so is X-Factor. Now, you have Wolfbane thank Havoc for not telling the X-Men about Cannonball being here earlier, because remember, X-Force is actually outlaws at the moment, and neither X-Factor nor the X-Men actually respect what X-Force is doing. Matter of fact, the other two teams, I say the other three teams, including Excalibur, they don't play ball with X-Force at all. And really, they're kind of hoping that sooner or later, that team right there will be officially shut down. Now you do have Val Cooper walk into the room to inform everyone they do have a new mission. Now their new mission is to, well, you know, protect that health clinic we saw earlier. Now the only reason why X-Factor is getting involved is because the government is getting involved. And the only reason why they're getting involved is because that phone call from the very beginning of this chapter from Tempo, because she did say, hey man, listen, you are going to be attacked by a terrorist group. And so the government got involved and called in X-Factor. Now, the team is actually informed about the test. The whole idea, the test has the ability to figure out if a baby is going to grow up as a mutant or as a human. And so for X-Factor, some of the members of the team don't really like the idea of being involved protecting someone who could actually hurt the mutant race down the road, especially with that kind of test. But you do have the entire team go, except for Quicksilver. Now, we're going to find out why at the very end of this book, but he does not go on this mission. Now, the next section is really more of seeing the Mutant Liberation Front arrive at the clinic. And when they do, they instantly attack Dr. Tucker. Now, he does survive, but he will die by the end of this chapter. Now, with that being said, you also have X-Factor arrive to fight against the actual bad guys. And after a few pages, the battle does go back and forth, but now we got to shift our focus over to Wolfbane. And here's the reason why. So at the end of the battle, she finds the doctor and he's barely surviving. But when it comes to the doctor, what he did was he went ahead and told his computer to actually download the test onto a drive. And then he tells Wolfbane to give that drive over to the government. Now, we already know that she does not want to do that at all, because again, she's one of the members of X-Factor who hates the idea of some kind of test being out there that could possibly hurt the mutant race down the road. And so after Dr. Tucker dies, you actually have Wolfbane tell the computer to abort the actual process of downloading the whole test onto the drive so that she can destroy it and nobody can find the actual test at all. No one can be able to actually build off of it and try to make a better version. Now, Polaris saw what she did, but at the same time, Polaris is not going to tell because Polaris also hated the idea of the test. Now, we do jump back over to the Mutant Liberation Front, where you do have Strife kind of confused on how in the world X-Factor knew to be there at that clinic. And so this is him kind of wondering if he has a traitor in his group, which he does. It's Tempo. But for him, he's still kind of wondering who it could actually be. And we do see every single member, including Tempo, say, no, boss, we have no idea how they found out. Now, the last page of the book does explain why Quicksilver did not want to go on the next mission. Here's the reason why. Because of his daughter, Luna. You see, around this time in Marvel Comics, Quicksilver had a daughter with a woman known as Crystal, who's an Inhuman. The problem was with the child's genetic makeup being half mutant, half inhuman, she unfortunately did not gain any mutant ability at all. It did seem like both sides of her genetics had canceled out each other, not giving her the chance to actually gain a power at all. And so for Quicksilver, it was him kind of being upset with the idea of his child being just a normal child, but then he realized that it's still okay if she was normal, or it was okay for her to be a mutant with powers or any human with powers. Either way, that is his daughter, and he should have been there the years that she had grown up without him. And so it's kind of Quicksilver realizing his mistakes of not really being there for his daughter, all because she had no powers, and kind of realized no matter what, he should have been there as her father because that is his job. But the book kind of ends on that note right there. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But also, guys, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.